This presentation from Canada.
I'm here with Tara. The story that we're going to talk about occurred around 2017 when we did the survey, but some of the activities and chaos leading up to the survey had started back around 2011 and onward. This is a small, non-profit, broader public sector workplace in Ontario with about 32 OPSU members, and there were also about 22 managers. Some of those managers weren't at high levels and were experiencing some of the same stresses as the workers. And Tara worked with another member on a kind of steering committee championing the survey. Now, when using the survey in many workplaces, it's my experience from previous surveys that workplaces have different starting points. Sometimes there's a cooperative approach where both parties just notice that they could take a journey towards psychological health and safety, adopt the standard, or, take steps to improve the workplace. Sometimes one party notices it before the other. Now, in this workplace, the workers were feeling stressed, and a lot of it had to do with how the organization was functioning and also getting stressed by, there was a lot going on in the community at the time. There were a lot of newspaper headlines alleging mismanagement at the organization, calling for an audit. And so amid all this chaos, around 2014, the staff unionized into OPSU. Prior to that, they weren't part of a union at all. So they organized around 2014, dealing with stress, and in no soon time around 2017 called the union up and said, we're going through a lot of stress and we want to do a survey or have some help to kind of address it. So on February 9th, 2017, the health and safety office at the union got a call from the local where workers were reporting to the union that they were having sleepless nights, there was trouble concentrating at home, workers were ashamed of their workplace. They were being yelled at by members of the public and also by high-level management staff, and management was yelling in the office that staff were muzzled about their work, that the employer was searching emails and disciplining staff. They told me that HR and management weren't independent from the board, that there was unfair hiring, that there was a lot of issues going on at the workplace, that the workers were suffering, and also some of the supervisors didn't have any power or autonomy to change anything. So one of the ways that the workers wanted to document their experience through a survey, which was an anonymous way for workers to speak up, it was a way to turn all of these issues that they were reporting into data, like collected in a systematic way, collected into data that they could then take to their employer and work with the employer to resolve some of the issues.
Reached out to officers health and safety because we were getting complaints from members that they felt they were working in a really toxic work environment, and we wanted a process to document this. People were noting that they're crying every day on their way to work and on their way home. They were praying in their cars before they go into the office. They were being followed on their personal time and while they're working, if they're doing a site visit. Like there was an instance where a manager was outside of somebody's home, like the member actually took photos, so has proof of that. Another member was followed to a park while she was with her children. So it was really, really scary. Managers, even to our own union meetings. There was 3 of the members who were basically recruited by management to record our meetings. So nothing really felt very safe. And it was incredibly toxic. People weren't sleeping. It was becoming such a horrible, horrible place to work. And we just wanted a process to document this because you can't really move forward until you know exactly what is happening. And we would hope by doing the survey, then the next step is, we would be able to paint this picture for management that, they would want to rectify this. This was our hope, and they would want to work with the union to try to alleviate some of these concerns. So to launch the COPSOC survey, we had to really stress that this process was going to be 100% anonymous. We had initially given management an opportunity to participate, but they declined. So we used the personal emails. But because management already had spies within the union, we set it up so the email went to their personal email, and the results didn't come back to the union ourselves, and it went directly to Terry or to John. We just had to really, really stress because that it was going to be 100% anonymous. Just as I mentioned, there were spies. We didn't want to use the work email anyway because they were monitoring those emails. It ended up being very successful, although there was a lot of hesitation and suspicion around pretty much anything anybody did. That was just, we lived on pins and needles and walking on eggshells at all times. So there was some concern that there was going to be repercussions for participating in the survey. But so we just had to make it clear to our members. That's why we're using SurveyMonkey. That's why we're using your personal emails, that they can't be monitored that way.
Not only did this employer not agree to participate jointly with us to run this survey, but they actually sent out a question, a captive question, that supervisors went around to all the workers and told all of the staff that they must answer. The question was to reply and say why they love working at the organization. And the members called me when they got this email, and they were concerned that they were being forced to answer a question like this right in the middle of our survey, and they were worried about how this would affect our survey.
After we did the survey, we presented the members with the survey results, and we had a meeting where we had a brainstorming session on what the members felt could be done within the workplace to make things better or enhance their experience. Even at this meeting, again, because there were spies, a lot of people didn't feel comfortable speaking open, even in our own union meetings, that a lot of the suggestions then were emailed directly to Terry, and she was the only one who was going to be receiving the emails, and then she just compiled. So when the brainstorming activity was all compiled, nobody knew who had said what. And I think that really presented a level of comfort for the members.
Our survey went out to the bargaining unit members through their personal emails at home, and they were asked to do it at home, not at work. And we had about an 86.5% response rate. The average number, OCAL says, the average number of people that write comments usually is about a third. But in this case, in this survey, 44% of the respondents provided additional comments at the end of the survey. So when we rolled up and looked at the comments, there were 11 about the toxic nature of the workplace and relationships with senior management. There were 11 about poor management style, things like dictatorial, unwilling to tolerate dissent, vengeful. Some of these comments echoed the complaints that I had been told about prior to us doing the survey, and part of the reason we did it, there was a couple of recommendations about replacing or reducing senior management, that the management numbers in this workplace were great numbers compared to the staff. There were also a couple of positive comments, such that they used to be a great employer, relationships with colleagues and certain supervisors made the work environment palatable. So as we normally do when we look at the comments, we latch on to the comments that provide hope and that give us a positive place to start. It was very clear that staff hoped to move forward. And so when we were planning to present to the employer, we wanted to open the conversation using some of these positive comments, like, our staff are simply amazing, this is my dream job. And another quote was, it has been really difficult to come up with something positive to suggest. I do believe that things can improve or I wouldn't still be here. So we put those comments right in the PowerPoint deck for when we were hoping to present the results to the employer. It was really important with us to speak to the employer about the results first, to work together and move forward and figuring out what actions or interventions might help. So we asked the employer for a meeting, and they agreed, and a meeting was set for May 29th. We invited OCAO to come and help us understand the results. And at the meeting, at the conclusion of the meeting, we said it was a lot to digest, take some time to digest it. We wanted them to work with us on a joint communique where the message was, we met, we heard you, we're going to work with you. We had wanted and asked them to reinstate someone that had been laid off, that the work had been continuing. So we wanted to know if they would do that. We wanted a joint committee made up of local members that had someone from the union to come and help identify and suggest changes to move ahead. One of the things we did at the end of the May 29th presentation was show the slide with the stages of change. The acknowledgement that workplaces and people go through various stages where they're ready to do something or where they're not. And we circled that for the staff, we were ready for a change and we were ready to work along with the employer for that change. So we were at the action stage. We wanted to make changes and we were hoping things would improve.
So after the results of the COPSOC were presented to the members and we did our brainstorming sessions, I think for the vision for the future, what like that looked to us, we might have been we were clearly very naive, but what we thought would happen is that the management would see the shocking results that 87 or 85% of the people that filled out the survey thought it was a toxic work environment. And I should note that it wasn't just members that had filled it out. Some other middle management felt it was a toxic work environment and approached us to see if they could actually participate in this as well. So it wasn't just the union staff that was feeling this way. But anyway, to our dismay, they did not feel that this was what was happening and that it was a toxic work environment at all. But those who felt, the members really felt that there needed to be acknowledgement from the senior management that this is really what is happening before we can move on. Just to tell us to move on, it's in the past, wasn't going to cut it. And so we were hoping that through our own health and safety committee, that we could create like a subcommittee that would just tackle these issues and then come up with ways to maybe implement some of the suggestions that the union had come up with to really try to make this a wonderful place to work again. The results of the COPSOC were then presented to senior management, and at that time, they had actually agreed to create this subcommittee with HR to address some of the issues that were identified. However, after that meeting, it really didn't take long for management to backtrack on that and continue on their tune that there was nothing wrong. So in an effort, we're clearly not getting anywhere with management. So the health and safety of OPSU made multiple attempts to try to present the results to our board of directors. Every single attempt was either blocked by not allowing them to come to the meeting or by a vote. So that didn't happen. So it's time for things to have to go a little bit of a different direction. So the COPSOC got leaked actually to members of the community, and the community really rallied behind the staff. There started to be protests at the monthly board meetings. Signs were made saying 85% toxic work environment. There was newspaper articles, radio interviews. Smokey Thomas had come to one of the board meetings. Officers Health and Safety and the Communications Department really had our back and really made known in the press what was happening to the staff. And it was a very overwhelming experience for the staff. So during this time, when there was incidences of harassment within the workplace, staff really didn't feel that there was anyone they could report this to because there was a severe lack of trust on every level of management, including the CAO and including the board of directors. So staff, instead of going internally to make any complaint, they just started contacting the Ministry of Labor directly. There were a few actually visits from the Ministry of Labor to the workplace. Some orders were written and including updating our harassment policy. So management sat on that for quite a while, but I'm happy to say along 2 years later, we now have a proper harassment policy for our workplace. All the negative attention that was in the press about the COPSOC survey really brought forward a lot of the other issues that were happening within the workplace and the board of directors. There was a lot of public scrutiny and call for a formal audit to be done on this workplace before this COPSOC about more than just employee relations. So it was finally announced after a lot of probing by the public. The Auditor General formally announced that they would be doing an investigation into this workplace.
Around September, it became apparent to us that our efforts to engage the employer in the survey either the beginning didn't work, looking at the results didn't work, nothing was really changing. The employer offered to meet with a couple of local reps, but not inviting any union assistants to assist them. We realized that they weren't really working with us. So the union started to escalate the activity. Writing letters to all the MPPs. We wrote a letter to every board member, the municipal councillors. The union and the employer were on the radio. The community that had been alleging mismanagement of the organization picked up on the fact that the staff were unhappy with how they were being treated. They were picking up on that. Meanwhile, the employer was trying to discount the survey results, saying that people filled it in twice and saying that there were really 100 employees. We went back to OCAL, and OCAL provided a written analysis confirming the validity of the survey results to try to help resolve the validity dispute. In any case, after all of that activity, in October 2017, the auditor did announce that they would do a review of this organization. The auditor report was released in September 2018, so it took about a year. When the auditor began, they reached out to the union and asked us for all of our materials, all the communications we had sent back and forth with the employer, the survey results, all of the details about our survey. So we sent them as much as we possibly could to illustrate what had gone on. The auditor had also collected information from the employer about the survey that they had done, the one that they signed in with their work email to complete a survey. And I'm assuming also that question that they sent out that we talked to about earlier in the presentation. And then the auditor did its own survey, and if you look, there was approximately the same amount of employees when the auditor did their survey as when OPSU did their survey. And even in the employer's survey, there were about 48 employees, not 100. The auditor did a comparison of the findings between the Stress Assess OPSU survey, the one we did based on the Copenhagen Psychosocial Questionnaire, the surveys and questions that the employer put out to the workplace, and the auditor did their own survey. The staff did feel validated that the auditor's comparison kind of echoed what they had said in the survey. And you notice that the auditor found that 45% of the people stated they were reluctant to report if they were aware of or had witnessed acts of harassment or violence. And about half agreed or strongly agreed that harassment was a concern at the workplace, and 49% in the bottom circle stated that there was a negative work environment. But the point here isn't so much that the auditor reinforced what the unions had found when we did the stress assess survey. The point was that we couldn't convince the employer to participate in it or to recognize the issues that came from it. That's the big point here, is that it caused all of this, outcry from the workers, and then the community picked up on it to then go and get an auditor to come in to say, yes, these issues were going on for the change to occur. So this is just how important it is that workplaces, all the parties in the workplace, engage in a change, or eventually, sometimes time and other factors, like in this case, the auditor report. Workplaces can hum along and be toxic until something comes along to change it. And if the parties aren't going to change it themselves, then eventually it will fester and it will get worse. And in this case, the auditor came in and did a report.
After the survey was done and all the negative publicity and the denial from senior management that was anything wrong with the workplace, the survey, nothing came of the survey. The workplace didn't change for quite a while after that. But in hindsight, I would still do it again, because it did bring forward exactly what was happening in terms of a workplace environment. The community rallied behind all of the staff. And at the end of the day, what happened was going to happen. A lot of people lost their jobs, but I think the survey just sort of helped rip the Band-Aid off instead of this slow, torturous, prolonged event. So we would definitely do the survey again, reflecting back on the events that took place during those years. And overall, it was a good experience.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting, completely different intervention story, but finally some message, I would say. We have, let's have a look if we have questions here. What this OPSEU experience share broadly? First question.
No, this is the first time we've shared the experience. But I see another comment in the box that Vicky says, we're so glad we had this presentation because this is a lot of typical of what happens in Ontario workplaces. And I so agree with that. And that's why we wanted to share this story. We wanted to share the story because here in Ontario, we have our enforcement is still focused on physical safety and the policies and procedures related to harassment, but we don't have that proactive inspection and stuff about psychosocial hazards yet. So what we do is we convince employers and organizations to participate, and then there's other surveys that compete with us. We try to put the COPSOC on the table, try to talk about, show all the validation of it, and usually it takes time just to consider what tool they're going to use here. And not all employers embrace it with open arms. So that is really a typical experience here. Oh, well, someone asked why a lot of people lost jobs. One of the things is that the jobs and the change in that organization had been reorganized many times since 2011. I think the auditor's report talked about they'd really never seen an organization overturn its staff so many times since 2011. So that losing jobs, losing these jobs, replacing them with these jobs was a 6 or 7 time process over those few number of years. And so that partly contributed to why this workplace unionized in 2014. They'd already been through 3 years of constant change and layoffs. And there were some reorgs after the survey as well. And it wasn't to do specifically with participating in the survey. The reorgs and the change and the lost jobs was happening just due to all of the chaos going on in the organization for like 7 years.
However, if I remember correctly, there was one steward who was let go during the survey.
Yeah, laid off on Valentine's Day, February, and then told to work her 40 days out instead of leave with her notice. So she was actually working with us during the survey with a notice that was taking effect in 40 days of a layoff. Yeah.
It's the auditor's report came in and they made the changes in the management structure. Some of the managers were also released.
That's right. The top couple of managers were changed over, and things are a little better. Things are better in the workplace now. Not perfect. No workplace is ever perfect. All you want is to engage in a journey together and work on things together.
Ask a question. Is this the normal reality in Canada? And Dorothy answered, no, just in Canada, in the US too, for information, for those who doesn't read the chat. We have the question from Herman. Are unskilled workers and the young more exposed to harassment? Are there large differences between workplaces regarding harassment?
I don't know if there's more unskilled or young, more exposed to harassment. I wouldn't say so, but I don't have any research to back that up. Just from my experience, and OPSEU represents about 170,000 workers. I see it in a lot of different workplaces where there's all kinds of different workers. So no, I don't think it's limited to particular workplaces. I think it does have a lot to do with the the ideas of justice and respect in that organization, and also how well an organization, consults with its Joint Health and Safety Committee to develop, fair and just harassment policies and programs, if people feel comfortable reporting, and if everybody knows there's a fair process, and if an organization addresses some of the organizational factors that often underlie harassment and bullying. We did the COPSOC survey in a community nursing organization where bullying and harassment and workload and emotional demands came out as the top 3. But when we addressed the workload and the emotional demands, the bullying and harassment dropped because we found out that a lot of those pressures, organizational pressures, were affecting the relationships between employees and the harassment levels. So what that taught us is, go at what organizational factors are underlying huge levels of bullying and harassment, and then we find it goes down.
Herman, you can see that healthcare is one of the highest frequencies of offensive behaviors, and construction is average. It's not just the young.
One of the things I want to say about my experience working with the COPSOC and everything is that a lot of it's the brave and leading organizations that choose to look at the organizational factors. It's a lot easier to focus on the person and the individual interventions, like building resilience or providing supports or programs to change the way that the individual acts in the workplace. And those are a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. The individual psychological approach is everywhere. And in fact, that's the default in my experience and my personal opinion. It's the brave and leading organizations that look at the organizational factors to begin with. And so I find that a lot of the surveys that some organizations will reach for are the ones that test engagement because I don't know, maybe they don't know that they should dig deeper and use a survey like COPSOC that digs deeper to org factors, or if they just want to test engagement. Because one of the speakers earlier today rightly pointed out that there is a difference between engagement and then undercovering all of the factors that could be at work in a workplace. So I think that the focus here is a lot psychological, and it takes the extra mile for us to go and find organizations that are willing to look at the organizational factors and thereby use the COPSOC.
There are organizations that have a much more positive story. And if you're interested in hearing one, Terry actually interviewed a person from such a workplace that did the survey 3 times, and they had a very positive experience. And that's on our website on May Day last week. Is it on the website yet? Or it will be on the website soon, but it's a story like this one, except from a more cooperative and positive point of view. So yes, we have both positive and negative workplaces.
It's not on our it's not on our YouTube channel yet, but it is on Facebook. I will go and look for that link.
Okay, I think we will close the session. What do you think, John?
I want to thank all the participants who put this work together. I apologize for the difficulties we had with the logistics, but I'm glad you all stayed on, and these stories were really good to hear, and it's really good to hear from all the different countries, the different experiences and the different contexts, and I thank everybody who presented very much for telling their stories. Thank you.
Herman said, very interesting presentation. I agree. It was very interesting to have these practical issues.
Yes, and I want to echo John's thanks to everyone in the COPSOC network and particularly the steering committee in planning this session, as well as the one on May the 7th. It added significant dimension to our offering, and I think that, as I said at the beginning, hearing each other's experiences, positive and negative, and helps on many levels, helps us professionally, but helps us to help the workplaces in our countries, and helps us understand, particularly in the last year. We thought last year when we ran this virtually that it might be our only occasion to do that, but of course we're doing it again, and it has expanded our reach in some ways, but we are looking forward to an opportunity to meet again in person sometime in the future, next year or the year after. And we really appreciate the audience, as I said at the beginning, from Canada and the audience from around the world, and joining and sharing today. So there is a meeting at noon, but if anyone has any other questions, all the speakers are still here, but I know that you have been sitting, or maybe some of you have been standing, but we've been here for 2 hours now. So, we'll close off unless anybody has any further questions. But thanks again to Juan and Emily for hosting today. And thanks to all the speakers for their presence, and as well as the recordings, to do the recordings in advance so we could control the time. And we even, it was a new, I guess, effort for us to figure out a way to add English subtitles, but it added another dimension to our technical ability, I would say, and learning lessons about having the backup on more than one computer. Of course, we all learn every time. So thanks again. Anybody have any other thoughts or comments?
Thank you for hosting us. This has been a really great afternoon here, maybe morning by you, but afternoon here, and we have enjoyed listening to experiences from different parts of the world. And I think no country has no problems. We all have issues to address, and we all have things to work with, but we can learn so much from each other.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Thank you very much for this enriching session. I think that we can share a lot, and we have much more to share, all of us, and we learn a lot of each other. So it's really very, very enriching. Thank you very much to make it possible.
Ditto, we're back at you, we would say. Thanks again. So, okay. I think this is a good question. Thanks, Jenny, for the suggestion on harassment and sexual harassment. It is something, is content that I think is important. I'm not sure if you were with us last week. I think some of the presentation that CAMH did includes their efforts around that, which is in that Facebook link that I included, and will be separated into its presentations on our website early next week.